My dearest Rupert, it has been a while since our last communications, and I fear that things have gotten increasingly worse. I regret to say that you were correct in your research that the planet Earth is undergoing great changes. I've been in contact with Mr. Ed and the Outdoor Wild Kids. They have agreed to help us. As you know, the 5 kingdoms of life on Earth will be affected by these ongoing changes that you and I have documented. Sincerely, your friend and colleague, Professor Featherstone. The Earth is the 3rd planet from the Sun, and the largest of the terrestrial planets. Earth was formed somewhere around 4.5 billion years ago, and is currently the only known planet to support life. And lots of it. There is an estimate of 6.5 million species on its land, and 2.2 million species in its oceans. These are the adventures of the Outdoor Wild Kids, as they explore the 5 known kingdoms of life on planet Earth. The Monera Kingdom, the Protista Kingdom, the Fungi Kingdom, the Plant Kingdom, and the Animal Kingdom. Let's go! Hey, Outdoor Wild Kids!
Hi!
Well, what are you doing? Come on down!
Come on, guys! What are we waiting for? Come on, let's go!
Calling the Outdoor Wild Kids, come in!
Hold on a second, let me put you on speaker. Guys, we're here.
Outdoor Wild Kids, I am transmitting you a copy of Professor Featherstone's notes about the 5 kingdoms of life and about Earth. During the next months, we'll be learning about the planet Earth and the inhabitants that live here. Your assignment, Outdoor Wild Kids, is to read the notes I just sent you about the 5 kingdoms of life that are found on Earth, and to acquaint yourself with them. You all should be receiving it now.
Okay, I got it.
Wonderful. I will see you all soon.
I didn't know that there were 5 kingdoms of life, did you?
No, I didn't. Got it. Got it.
And now to our Outdoor Wild Kids in Nova Scotia.
Got it! Got it!
Clover the Bee here. While the Outdoor Wild Kids are learning more about the 5 kingdoms of life so that they can share them with you, we are going to go to a special segment of Outdoor Wild Kids Adventures. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Boys and girls, welcome back. Today, we're going to visit Mr. Ed as he takes a special team of Outdoor Wild Kids to iguana and tortoise breeders of Florida. They're going to visit the Galapagos tortoises. Galapagos tortoises come from an island off the coast of Ecuador in South America. They can grow to be 6 feet long, they're over 1,000 pounds, and can live to be over 100 years old. And they're also in danger. Now to Mr. Ed and his special team. Welcome to Outdoor Wild Kids. I'm your host, Mr. Ed. And today we're at Florida Iguana and Tortoise Breeders. I'm here with Sam Pascucci, the owner of this zoo. Yes. And also with me today, we have a special guest. We have Rudy Pascucci, Sam's brother, who's also the director of the Palm Beach Museum of Natural History. Now, Sam, it says iguana and tortoises. What kind of tortoise are we speaking of here?
Well, we have right here Galapagos tortoises, but also we have Aldabra tortoises, which is the only other giant tortoise left in the world, and we have African spur-thighed tortoises, redfoot tortoises, Amazon basin yellowfoot tortoises, and elongated tortoises.
That's a lot of tortoises. Now I know Florida has its own tortoise. It has the gopher tortoise, doesn't
Yes, that's
it?
correct.
Do we have any of those here or no?
No gopher tortoises.
Okay, because aren't they endangered or?
Yeah, they're actually protected, and
They're
you need
protected.
special licenses to own them and everything.
Excellent.
I actually have the licenses, but I don't have any.
Don't have any tortoises. All right, we'll keep that in mind. Maybe for Christmas next year you can get one. Sam's going to give us a little tour here with Rudy, and we're going to go look at some wonderful iguanas and Galapagos tortoises. I'm Mr. Ed, Outdoor Wild Kids. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Verona and I'm here with Asia, and today we're going to be talking about the Galapagos tortoise. He's actually one of the world's largest tortoises.
They're amazing animals. They can live for 150 plus years and weigh more than 475 pounds.
These tortoises are herbivores, which means they get energy from feeding off of plants.
Right, and they also bask in the sun, and that's where they get all of their energy from, and they actually nap for up to 16 hours every day.
There's times where I wish I was this tortoise.
I mean, like, for real, that's a long time.
Like, instead of going to school, they nap.
And it's really cool because you would think that their shell weighs a lot, but it's actually made of honeycomb type structures. And it makes their shell super light so that they can move around. I mean, imagine carrying like that huge shell, like
That's
a
true.
really heavy shell. So their shells are pretty light.
Did you guys also know that they can live up to a year without any food or water because of their slow metabolism?
Yeah, it's amazing, but the sad thing about them is that they're endangered, which means that there's not a whole lot of them left.
We need to preserve them, but we can do it.
This is Adolf. He's a Galapagos tortoise. He's about 80 years old, and he weighs about 650 pounds. Obviously a male tortoise. The females don't get quite as large, maybe about 350 pounds. Actually, we'll see later some of the females.
How fast can they move?
They get going pretty quickly, about the speed of a slow walk, especially if they're after the females. And what we do, there's different pens, and what we do different times of the year, we separate the males from the females. That encourages breeding. So you keep the males separate from the females just about until the males can't take it any longer, and then they'll just knock that fence down. 4x4, 6x8, cemented in the ground, and once they decide they want to go through it, that fence is coming down.
How do you know if it's a boy or a girl?
The males have a much longer tail. If you come around this side here, you can see the males have a much longer tail, but it's easy to tell just by looking at size when you're looking at an adult animal. An adult male is 650 pounds, is nearly twice the size if you take a look at the females. But other than looking at tail structure and size, you don't really know, especially in the young. Sometimes if we want to determine in the young, what we'll do is we'll actually do an endoscope where we go in physically and look for the structures of male and female.
Hey, welcome back. Mr. Ed here with Outdoor Wild Kids, and we got a special report from Brent. Brent, what's your special report on?
The gopher tortoise.
The gopher tortoise. And where can we find gopher tortoises?
We can find them right here in Florida.
Awesome. Now, behind me, I don't have a Florida tortoise, a gopher tortoise, but I do have an African spur tortoise, a close relative of the Florida tortoise. Now, to tell you a little about this guy here, he is the biggest tortoise from the mainland. So, you've met the Galapagos tortoise. Well, he's the biggest tortoise from an island. These guys here from the continent of Africa, and the name comes from a spur on their back leg. But back to the gopher tortoise, Brent. What else can you tell me about these guys?
They're protected by law, and they can build burrows.
Cool.
They not only store themselves in the burrows, but they also store the eggs. And the eggs will take about 90 to 100 days to hatch.
Really? That's a long time.
And let's say you would want to build a house in their
Burrow?
habitat. They would relocate.
Relocate.
They would relocate.
Now, the gopher tortoise, can I find that at your local pet store, or?
No. You'll find them here in Florida, forests and pastures.
Okay. So, can I collect them and make maybe a turtle soup from them, or no?
No, you can't.
Oh, why?
Because they're protected by law.
Oh, they're protected by law. Okay, yeah, that must mean they're probably endangered, right?
Yes, they are endangered.
Okay. I heard a little thing about the gopher tortoises. You were talking about the homes they build.
Yes.
I heard that those burrows that they use, other animals actually use them. Yeah, they like move in afterwards. Pretty neat, huh?
Yeah.
This is Mr. Ed with Brent, Outdoor Wild Kids. Thanks for watching. Hey kids, we're back with Sam Pescucci, owner of Florida Iguana and Tortoise Breeders. Sam, What are those things back there again?
African spur tortoises, and this is again the largest mainland tortoise. And right away we can see the difference in the size of these animals. The females are much smaller, get to about 100 pounds. The males get much larger, 175, even 200 pounds. Something interesting you can see about the male, you see the way the ends of his shell curls up? So even from a distance, it's very easy to tell the males because that end of their shell will curl up. The females are much rounder. Now these animals can lay 23 eggs in a clutch, 26 eggs in a clutch, and they'll lay 3 times a year. So we can get as much as 90 eggs or so per year. And we have a very high hatch ratio, above 90%. It takes about 90 days in the incubator. And what we do is you can actually determine sex with these animals by the incubation temperature. So if you want females, you incubate them higher. You want males, you incubate them lower.
That's the same with alligators as well, and I believe even dinosaurs follow that same.
Some reptiles are actually the opposite. So the temperatures can change depending on what reptile you're incubating.
Huh. Here comes one now. Now, do you give these specimens names or numbers?
They all, some of them have names, they all have numbers, and that's for our medical records and breeding records and everything. We have that.
Gotcha.
Now, this is like Brent was saying, this is a gopher tortoise, and they can dig a huge hole, 30 feet down on the ground, 6 feet wide.
These things?
Yeah, 2 of us can go in there and
Really?
can actually just lay in the front of it. Now in Florida
That
here,
is cool.
we have a relatively low water table, and we have coral. We only go down about 3 feet, so they don't really get the opportunity to do that here in Florida.
Gotcha.
But they can actually dig out from underneath this fence in a matter of an hour, hour and a half or so. So all of the spur pens have rebar about every 6 inches surrounding the pen. So that way we know that they're not digging out. Now, something that's really interesting about this tortoise, we don't have a sample of it, but this tortoise, because it lives in the desert, has to be able to conserve water. And so what they'll do, they have a system that allows that water to be reutilized by the body. So they can actually concentrate urine down to a white paste, and it's actually uric crystals. Maybe we'll see some samples of that before. That's one of the mechanisms they have to be able to live on the desert. They have a special skin which is made to resist the sun and retain water. So you have to be careful. If you have a situation where you have a lot of rains, their skin can actually rot off, will slough off, because they have no way of drying that skin out. So some of the things that you face when dealing with a desert tortoise, these animals mostly eat hay and plant material. And here on the farm, we do feed them a special tortoise diet.
Okay, what's in that?
It's compounded by, we actually use Missouri tortoise chow, and they use a lot of grasses and hays and stuff like that. So it's a natural diet for them.
Okay.
It's just pelletized, and it has vitamins and calcium and stuff.
Good.
So that's a little bit on the spur tortoise.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. That was very interesting. Good stuff.
You're watching Outdoor Wild Kids.
Biologists today have classified and divided all living things into 5 groups. They are called kingdoms. These kingdoms are based on how living things are the same and how they are different. Kingdom 1, Monera, 1-cell organisms.
The first kingdom is the Monera. They are single-celled, may or may not move, have a cell wall, and no nucleus. That means they only have 1 cell and are the smallest living organisms on the earth.
Monera are very tiny, although one type, named the blue-green bacteria, kind of looks like algae. They are filamentous and quite long, but have no visual structure inside the cell and no visual feeding mechanism. They absorb nutrients through their cell wall and produce their own food by photosynthesis.
Cells with a nucleus are known as eukaryotic cells. Single-cell eukaryotes are called protists. Kingdom 2, protists. Single-cell organisms with a nucleus like our own cells.
The second kingdom is the protist single-celled, and it's usually moved by cilia, flagella, or by amoeboid mechanisms. There's usually no cell wall, although some forms may have a cell wall. They have organelles including a nucleus and may have chloroplasts, so some will be green and others won't.
They are small, although many are big enough to be recognized in dissecting microscope or even with a magnifying glass. Nutrients are acquired by photosynthesis, ingestion of other organisms, or both. Examples are paramecium, amoeba, and euglena.
Protists appeared more than 1 billion years ago and are the ancestors of all plants and animals. Kingdom 3, fungi, mushrooms, molds, yeast.
Fungi are multicellular life with a cell wall, including a nucleus. They have no mechanism for locomotion, which means they can't move, by the way. Fungi range in size from microscopic to very large, such as a mushroom.
Nutrients are required by absorption. For the most part, fungi require nutrients from decaying materials. For example, mold or athlete's foot.
Clover the Bee here. Did you know that you probably use fungal products every day without being aware of it? People eat mushrooms of all shapes, sizes, and color. Yeast are used for making bread, wine, beer, and solvents. Drugs made from fungi cure disease and stop rejection of transplanted hearts and other organs. Fungi are also grown in large vats to produce flavoring for cooking, vitamins, and enzymes for removing stains. Kingdom 4, plants. Plants produce oxygen. And now let's hear from our outdoor wild kids in Nova Scotia.
Plants are multicellular and don't move. Plants get nutrients from the sun.
Plants make their own food. Examples of plants are flowers, vegetables, trees, and grass.
Clover the Bee here. Did you know that plants are very important to life on Earth? Plants produce the oxygen that is in the air we breathe. Kingdom 5, animal, big or small, including humans.
Animal kingdom eukaryote cells, multicellular organisms, animal-type cells.
It looks like all animal cells must take in food, probably because animals acquire nutrients by ingestion.
Examples are cat and deer, flies and camels, a mouse, a lion, a lemur, and us humans.
We will be learning more about the 5 kingdoms of life here on Earth in future episodes of Outdoor Wild Kids Adventures. But for now, let's join Mr. Ed and his special team of Outdoor Wild Kids as they continue to visit the iguana and tortoise breeders of Florida.
Here we have 2 female Galapagos tortoises, and these girls are around between 280 and about 320 pounds. And first off, you can see the striking size difference between the males and the females. Some of the interesting things that we do here on the farm, if you take a close look at this female tortoise, you see actually she has some fiberglass patches on her shell. And she has those fiberglass patches on her shell because when the males are doing the mounting process during breeding, they can actually very easily injure the female by digging holes in her shell. So just prophylactically, I'll fiberglass those shells to prevent the males from damaging the females. Now, the females have some very interesting physiology, and that is that they have a special gland that stores sperm. And what they'll do is they can store that sperm for 3 years. So actually what they'll do is they'll mate with the male, and then they'll look at different elements in the weather. They'll look for if it's a rainy season, how much food is abundant, if it's hot, if it's cold. And so they'll travel around and decide when is exactly the best time to lay those eggs that the hatchlings have the best chance of surviving. So in effect, she can mate with a male. 2 years later, when she's judged that it's the right time, she'll inseminate herself and then lay the eggs. Kind of an interesting fact.
What happens if they don't lay any eggs?
The chance of the sperm still being viable just decreases, and there really isn't a lot of data on that. There are a lot of unknowns with these animals because we haven't had a chance of seeing a lot of their breeding. So, there's a lot of assumptions that we're doing. There's some facts that we're seeing, and so you put that together and you kind of paint an outline of understanding the animal. But we don't really have all of the data on them that we wish we had.
Are they dangerous?
They're they're gentle creatures, as long as they don't ram you or step on your foot. They're not a predator, so their first reaction is to be defensive, pull their head inside their shell. They live on a hold together, different time frame than we do. They'll pull their head in their shell and they'll just wait for you to die out there. Which is actually what happens in the African spur-thigh tortoise in Africa, when there are lions that attack some of these animals. And back years ago when we did import those animals, I had animals that had come with scratches and nibbles and bites out from lions. But what they'll do is they'll wait for, when they get attacked by a lion, what they'll do is they'll just hunker down inside their shell and they'll just wait for that animal to go away. He's a mammal. He can't spend that much time trying to get to that eating side. So eventually he just gives up. She can sit there for an hour, 3 hours, and then she'll just walk away. So they have a whole together different time frame. There's a lot of other little interesting facts. In Africa, what the natives would find is they would find these little green patches. There would be a fire, and that fire would completely burn out a field, yet they would find these little green patches. And what they realized that it was when the forest goes on fire, the tortoises will take off and they'll run inside a field. They'll run to a field. And then as the fire catches up to them, they'll just hunker down, that fire will burn past them, and they'll get up and walk away. So they can actually survive a fire. But they're smart enough to know that they've got to get out of the forest, get away from the trees where it's a lot hotter. That's another interesting fact. Well, I'll pose a question to the children. In the wild, we've known that some of these giant tortoises will actually catch birds. So how do you think they could do that?
Probably like pretend they're inside a hole in a rock or something and wait to get.
Well, you're close. What they do is they have, to begin with, they have a symbiotic relationship with the finch, and what they'll do is when the finch is around, they'll stand up, and we'll see it on some of the tortoises later. We'll go and we'll stimulate them, and they'll stand up. They become like a statue, and what they're doing is they're letting the finch pick all of the parasites out of their skin. But when they're standing there, they're frozen like that. If the birds come and they're pecking around at the little seeds or whatever are on the ground, if the bird happens to get underneath them, he just pulls off his four legs, comes down, and he squashes them, and then he can just back up and eat them. Now, they don't typically eat birds, but it's something that they can do if they're starving, and they've been known to do it. So it's kind of another interesting fact. You wouldn't think an animal like this could actually catch a bird.
Can a tortoise roll over?
Yes, they can roll over. The males will fight, and the males will actually flip each other over. Or a lot of times the males, specifically in the Galapagos tortoise, unlike the Aldabra tortoise, Galapagos tortoise is a much more aggressive breeder, and he'll push that female all around the pen. Sometimes he'll actually, in the process, inadvertently flip her over. If they can live for a long time over on their back, they just can't live for a very long time in the sun. They'll die within about 3 hours if they're in the sun, because their lungs are on the top here, and when they flip over, all of their organs will sit on top of their lung and they suffocate. But they really panic and they struggle to get over, and in the sun, that's when they'll die if they flip over.
When approaching a tortoise, what should a person do or not do?
Well, obviously you have to move slow. Some animals like to be scratched and like to be touched. Some animals don't. You don't approach them from the top of their head because it's a predatory response where they're reacting to maybe a bird or something trying to attack them. So they'll pull their head inside their shell. They like to be scratched from underneath. So you'll scratch their neck and they'll stand up for you if you approach them that way. Any other questions?
Yeah. How long can they go without eating?
It's a good question. They can go very long time without eating. I think one of the kids that mentioned earlier, they can go for a year. They won't if they don't eat. Exactly how long that they could go without drinking, I'm not sure. But they have that same bladder that the spur does, where what they'll do is they can recycle that fluid through their system and concentrating their urine. And they don't do it as much as the desert tortoise does, but they can still do a pretty effective job. So again, they can live for many months without even drinking, 3-6 months. I think it will have a lot to depend on what the weather is. So if it's in the winter time and it's not really sunny, or they're in the forest or something like that, then how long they can live is probably much longer. But if it's hot out and they're not drinking, their metabolism is much higher, so their caloric intake is going to be a lot greater. So then I think you have a situation where they're going to run out of food or water quick, and it might die much sooner. So how long they can live really depends on that environment. One of the things that early on, when in the early pirates and the shipping days, what the vessels would do is they would go to the Galapagos Islands. They would take many tortoises and they would load them on their ships. Now what's interesting is those ships were actually designed to put the tortoises in little bays in the bottom. They realized that they would use them for ballast. And so what they would do is they would put them in their little pens, and then as they would sail around the world, they would slaughter them for fresh meat as they would go. So they could live for a year on those ships and not die without, and they didn't have any food or any water with that. And then it provided meat for the sailors.
Mr. Ed, what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise?
I think Sam put it best when he said the difference between turtles versus tortoises. For one, visually you can tell the difference. Turtles tend to have a compact shell. Tortoises tend to have a mounded shell. Turtles swim. Tortoises are land animals. And the point that really stuck with me is, and this will help all you guys out there know the difference, is that turtles are predators and tortoises are herbivores. And now we know. Thanks for watching Outdoor Wild Kids. Bye.